And I'm gonna share my screen with you. Can everybody see my the PowerPoint for this week? A heads up, thumbs up, great. All right, first things first. Okay, first thing I wanted to discuss with everybody was our homework for this week, discussion for this week, previous homework, and previous discussion. As I mentioned last week, the discussions have been excellent. You guys are really participating, are really engaging. I really like that. Uh, my job, I'm looking at it from the point of view of, I mean, here to provide you some guidance on the discussion if it's need uh, to step in and share in the conversation that you're doing. I'm not policing you, but I'm wanting to see your participation on it. That being said, it was brought up to my attention that some of the discussions do not pertain in any way to what we're doing, or the topic is that I'm asking to you to respond is totally incongruent or not part of the discussion. Believe it or not, that is done on purpose. One, the discussion itself is opening a theme on technology or any theme that I choose to do. I could do social environments like we're going to do for this week. The first two times have been technology. The questions that I ask is what I want you to answer based on what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're observing. Yes, in many cases, the direct question cannot be answered by just looking at the meeting. But in observing the responses that I'm getting out of every one of you know what you're talking about. You understand the concept that was being asked. I am looking for certain topics and certain points, and when I step in into the conversation and respond to you or make my comment, I'm always bringing up to you the issues as to why I think this is happening. Most of the time, I'm telling you the same things. I'm telling you, for example, the main concern of a company is positioning to obtain or to better themselves and gain a return on investment. In other words, the terminology that we learned on the first session, that is return on an investment is based on gaining a competitive advantage. Why a company is doing X or Y is very difficult to tell unless you do an in-depth review and you study books and financial statements and so on and so forth. You will not be able to really get into the depths of things. On the last discussion on Microsoft, the question could have thrown you off for a loop when I mentioned in the comment about Bill Gates. And Bill Gates has been on the news lately because Bill Gates is being divorced. And for all practical purposes, depending on what you read or who you listen to or whatever, he's being taken to the cleaners. His wife is making a good amount of money, or he's taking his wife to the cleaner, whichever the case. Can you call it a red herring? Yeah, it's probably a red herring, but it's done on purpose because it fits under the perspective of the whole conversation. Bill Gates has not worked for Microsoft for over a year, I think almost 2 years. He is still involved with the company because he used to be the owner. He used to be the president of the board. He used to be involved on everything. Now he makes money on what Microsoft makes with money. So Bill Gates is gaining out of all this. Is Bill Gates' vision to expand and be big? Yes. Like every successful CEO, CFO, executive that is in managing a company, their main goal is to expand, to grow, and to be big. Can you say that Microsoft is a predatory company? It depends on who you ask. If you ask a small company that just got bought out and didn't make the money that they want, just to put their technology on the shelf, that way you don't have competition, from Microsoft doesn't see your competition, it could be predatory. It could be very well designed that the company that sold out is making the owners, two or three owners of that company, or a few executives, a few stakeholders, make a ton of money on it, but it's done on design. So when a company like Microsoft, Google, Apple, any big company you mention out there is doing something, is by design. They've been thinking about this, and they have only one thing in mind: to grow, to be big, to make money. If you have read about Microsoft for a long time, or if you've been involved in Microsoft's histories and everything, you will also find out that they have lost millions of dollars and millions of potential revenue to royalties that they can no longer have, to write um, copyright infringement and violations. If you go research, for example, MS DOS, Microsoft DOS, when the last version of Microsoft DOS was put out, when the last version of Microsoft for Workgroups was put out, which, by the way, you needed DOS and Microsoft Workgroups in order to operate together and function as a single operating system in a machine. By the time the system was put out, it was already copied and being sold as a bootleg company, as a bootleg software in China and South America. It was already translated and sold, or in some instances, it wasn't even translated. It was just bootlegged and sold. Microsoft didn't have a chance to recoup that money. That's why if you follow Microsoft, or if you follow many of these companies, Apple is notorious about this. A lot of the game companies are notorious about doing this. You can no longer just buy software, you buy licenses, and it takes a long process to get those licenses enabled and working for you. They're trying to protect themselves. So basically, what we're doing in here is bringing up to you the fact that you may not see relevance on the topic when I ask you the questions. You may not see relevance to what is being covered in class. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to bring a discussion, to bring participations among you and discuss everything that you've been saying. Every one of you in the discussions, every one of you that have participated in the discussions, have brought in points and understanding of the subject matter. It's not like one of you is saying this doesn't make any sense and either don't answer it or gives totally erroneous information. No, that is not the case. It's always been good, common sense approach to things and very well explained, very well done. So have patience with it. This is the whole purpose of this, to be able to entice you and to start thinking and to do some critical thinking about what's going on. Look at the big picture. Look at what's going on. How will you apply this to everything that is happening? It may affect you, it may not affect you at all. Discussions, that's how they're going to continue to be. Tonight on discussion 3, you're going to see a totally different topic. You're going to see social environments involved in your discussion. You're going to see it to the point that there is no technology involved, to the level that we know of technology. That's what is so important to look at it from the point of view of have an open mind about what is going on and see it and understand it. All right. If anybody has any questions, just let me know. Otherwise, we're going to continue. Post them on the chat and we address them. The other item is the projects. I need for you to make sure you have submitted the name of your company to me. I ask you, when you're looking at a company, look at the topics that I gave you. Why is that company business model such model? Is that company a company that primarily does web hosting, for example, like GoDaddy or Bluehost or many other companies out there? That's their bread and butter. Sell internet connections, sell domains, sell registrations, things of that nature. If you pick Target, if you pick Amazon, while those companies have those capacities, their primary subject, their primary matter is not web hosting. Now, you will argue with me, Amazon does have web hosting. And I will argue, yes. So if you wanted to do Amazon and you want to do it from the point of view of web hosting, then I expect you to address web hosting as the main topic why you pick that company, and so on and so forth. If you have any question about any of the companies that you're picking, just give me a ring, drop me off a message, drop me off an email. I will answer to you right away as soon as I can. And we go through the process, and that way you will see that it's not as complicated as you may think it is. It's very easy to follow. And main thing is to decide, am I approaching the company from the point of view of gaining competitive advantage, or am I approaching the company from the point of view of this is how they're gaining the competitive advantage, or this is how they make profit? What is their bread and butter as far as a company is concerned? So those are the things that you're looking at when you're looking at a company, and you're looking specifically at deciding why you want that e-commerce company. I ask you to pick a company that has the option to be uh, online and has a brick and mortar. Nowadays, most companies have a building, a location where they sell their goods or not. Well, web hosting companies very seldom have that, because web hosting companies have it so it's all online, cloud-based, uh, web-based. If you can choose one that is that way, fine. I will not argue with you. We will work it out. It is always an option for you to do it. I'm asking you more than anything else for you to tell me, okay, this is what I'm seeing and this is why I'm picking this company. Then I'm going to tell you yes, or why don't you consider the company from this point of view, like I've done with some of you. All right, good. Uh, Again, anybody wants to talk to me about the company, the name of the company, what you're choosing, the topic, whatever, we can do it after class, or you can drop me an email. All this good stuff we'll be able to discuss. Grades. You probably by now are seeing your grades on on Canvas. If you did not submit your homework one, I gave you a 0. If you don't submit homework 2, I will give you a 0 the same way. I'm still receiving your homework 1. I will work with you. Just let me know. Hey, I had an issue with this. Mr. Ramirez, here is my work. Can you accept it? I will accept it. I don't have a problem with that. But if you don't tell me anything, if you disappear from here and you don't let me know what's happening, there is no way for me to be able to determine what is going on with everything that is happening.
So, excuse me, are you still entering grades? Because there's, I guess, I'm not seeing a grade for homework one, and I'm pretty sure that I turned it in.
Okay, Margot, send me a quick note on email
Okay.
and tell me I'm not seeing my grade. I am very new at Canvas, full disclosure on that. So I'm still finding my way, and I'm finding that I had some of the grades hidden for some people, and some people were showing grades. So I'm looking into everybody's grades. Okay. Homework 2, you had an answer. If you turn homework, I responded to you on how I graded the each individual question. If for any reason you didn't make the full grade, it's because something was missing from the assignment. I'd be glad to discuss with you anything that you need to see. Uh, I'm seeing in here, Michelle, Nicole, Priscilla, you are not seeing any grades. Okay. If we don't see any grades, I will work it out so you get to see the grades, even if I have to copy the screens and send them to you until I get resolved the issue with grades. But grades are being posted as we speak for all the assignments that we have.
Professor, I have a question about the project. Is there currently any like instructions on the project itself, or do we have to wait until week 4? I know you've gone over it like throughout the classes, but is there any type of like document that we could kind of reference in the meantime?
Yes, it's on your Canvas. On
Okay.
week 1, I posted in there. And let me get back to it and we can look it up real quick while we're here. Modules. On week 1 class notes, I have it under list electronic commerce projects. It's a document. It's a Word document that you can see in there.
I see it. Thank you. Sorry about
Okay,
that.
no problem. If you have any problems with it, just give me a notification and I can look it up. Ernest, I see your message about homework 1 and week 2 is missing on your participation. Uh, Thank you, Sergio, for that. Sergio posted the electronic commerce project on the chat if anybody needs it too. Uh, Ernest, send me a quick email also. That way I double check in there why is it that your discussion is not showing. If you participated, it's in there because the discussion is set up that you have to post your response to the questions that I ask before you can respond to anybody. And remember, in the instructions that I'm given for the discussions, I'm asking you to provide at least 3 conversations. You have to respond to at least 3 of your peers. So posting the conversation by itself is 1 item plus 3 conversations that you discuss with your peers that makes it 4. So if you only posted 1 item yourself, I'm only giving you credit for half of the points because you did not participate with everybody else. So keep that in mind. In the instructions, I'm always saying you must participate with 3 of your peers. You cannot post your conversation with anybody unless you respond to the questions on the main topic given for the conversation in the discussion. Okay, good. I, I, I like this. Send me these emails. Let me know uh, about this issue so I can start investigating with the university as to why your Canvas grades don't show, even though I posted them in there and each says that that there is nothing blocking them from showing. But anyway, while I'm finding this, I'm gonna start sending you each one of you the grades that I have posted. That way you can see what we have. until this issue gets resolved. Okay. Let's see. Projects, homework 3, discussion 3, homework 2, discussion 2. Okay. Next week is week 4. We are at 1/2 of the course as of next week. For week 4, there is going to be homework, which is the draft of your paper. There is going to be the midterm examination, which is going to cover 1/2 of your classes. It covers up to the chapters that we are covering that day, which is up to chapter 7. So you must read chapter 7 in order to cover the midterm. As to the homework, which is your paper project, your draft project. Remember on the instructions, I'm asking you to lay out your project, your cover page, your index or your table of contents, table of tables, table of charts, of these things that are needed in there, references, and the body of the document. If you think about it, a lot of the information that is going to be required, which is the last page of your document, of your project, we haven't covered it yet. So what I'm asking of you is to basically build the template that you will use in your report. What is your cover page? It's going to be the title of your report, who you're addressing it to, and who's coming from. Table of contents. Build a simple table of contents. Introduction. You already have the topics that we're going to cover. What is the company? Where does it trade? How does it trade? What is the symbol? And then list all these other items in there. The introduction of the company can be done without much information, because right now you already have the company. So all you need to do is go back and say, okay, if I have this company, what is the basic information on this company? Where are they located? What kind of company it is? What kind of business is doing? And the reason why you pick this company. That's your basic introduction on it. Include your reference page, which should be the last page of your document. Remember, we're talking about references. We are not talking about works cited. We're following an APA format, so you don't have references. You have references, you do not have works cited. Any documentation that you're gonna use to create your paper must be sourced and documented on your references. If you wanna use footnotes on individual parts of your document, linking the number to a bottom footnote at the bottom, listing the information, the source of the document, that is fine, that's acceptable. Still, you have to show at the end on your references the main conversation, where is this information coming from, the author, time and date, the same format that you do for any other document that you're going to reference at the end. I personally like to do the footnotes because it's a quick reference, and then it's just a matter of copying it back to the actual references. But it gives me quick information and quick way for anybody that is reading my document to go back and see it. Remember, at the beginning of the class, I told you that you should present yourself, or you look at yourself as somebody that is talking to your peers, your employees, your coworkers, your team. If you are a manager, a team director, anything like that, that's how I want you to think about this. This is not just a class project. You're looking at something else. You're looking ahead of yourselves already. You need to think already under those terms of what is it that you're going to be, how are you going to present yourself? Are you going to use an incredible amount of color and graphs and charts that become distracting? No, this is a professional looking document because it's for your company. That's how you're going to do it. On the draft itself, when you build this draft with these points in here, it automatically gives you the work document for your PowerPoint presentation. You don't have to turn a PowerPoint presentation next week. All you do is just rough draft of your document, but you do need to start building on your presentation. Well, this document already that you're preparing is going to give you the basics of the PowerPoint presentation. If you think about it, you already have a title, that's your first slide. You have a reference, that's your last slide of your presentation. You're not going to have a table of contents detail or anything, but you may have the main topics covering this information. Okay, one question that has come up a few times is table of contents, table of charts, table of graphs. You know the table of contents is like an index. Anybody that is reading the document is going to be able to find information by looking at this. If you create your document in a way that can link information to it, I'm not asking you to do that. It's a lot easier for the reader to find information. When you create the document for this project, I am asking you to create tables. You can create tables on sales, you can create tables on population, you can create tables on anything. You are going to put that table somewhere in your document, and you're going to address that table by saying, on reference to table such and such, table number one, call this switch, or in table one, you can denote that we're noticing a change in population. The index called table of tables should have that table address in there. As a reader, I can go back and look at that index and say, okay, table of tables. Wow, I like that table. I go to it, to the page that is there, and I can see information that I can actually absorb immediately without reading the whole document. Sometimes that's important. For a person that is strictly visual, it's important to do something like that. For somebody else, it may not be, but that's why I'm asking you to start producing that. When you get your company information, especially your financial information, and you see the chart that shows sales or stock market graphs or things like that, you're going to copy and import that information onto your document. You're going to have a source of that quick document that you're drawing and where you're drawing it from and everything. That graph that you just copy from the internet must exist on your table of graphs and charts. That way, that index will show me, if I look at it, oh, this is financial information available in here as a chart. But because you did not create it, you import it directly from the internet, it goes in there. If you build it yourself, then it goes under the tables. Or if you build the chart yourself, it goes under the table of charts. That's why I am asking you to produce that information with those two specific tables, besides the regular index that is going to be built for the regular table of contents on information that you have. If you have questions on that, let me know. We'll work in more details on this. There is no rush on it, but start thinking, because next week is already halfway through the semester. If you wait until the last week to do this project, you will not have time, especially since you have to do a presentation. So next week, for week 4, we have the draft project and the midterm. There will be no discussions, and the class notes are going to be only for chapter 7. That's about it. So as I said before, the midterm is an open book midterm. You can look at any information that you want to answer the questions that I'm asking you. How many questions? I do not know yet. I may ask you 25 questions. I may ask you 50 questions. I may ask you 100 questions. I don't use test banks. I create my own questions. So it's important that it can be accurate and complete for you. That's why I allow the open book, because when you're at work and your boss or your bosses or your department is asking you for something, they're not expecting you to have memorized the whole book or the whole manual. You have reference manuals to do this. That's what I'm thinking. This way is the best way for me to get you into that discipline. I got a question in here. Does the midterm has to be completed in one sitting? Or another question by Cesar, is the midterm time? Yes and no. It doesn't have to be completed in one sitting. I open it on Wednesday and you have until Friday night to complete it. So no, you don't have to do it in one sitting. Yes, it's time. You have 2.5 days to complete the midterm. So time yourselves, pace yourselves. That way you can respond to all the questions accurately. On homework 3, which is similar to what you're going to have on homework 4, a form that you complete information. Some of you gave me definitions, and I didn't gig anybody on definitions because I want you to understand something. On day 1 of the classes, I ask you that when you give me definitions on anything, don't just go back to a dictionary or to an encyclopedia or reference chart and tell me this is the meaning of data and it's the English meaning of data. I ask you, when you do that, look at the information basically from the point of view of management information systems. What does data mean for management information systems? What does data mean for management information systems? What does knowledge imply in management information systems? That tells me very much, if you are able to discern that from the point of view of management information systems, that you're understanding the topic at hand. Giving me a definition from the internet, from a dictionary or from a library or whatever you want to call it, that strictly does not mean, doesn't have the meaning of management information systems, is really not the right answer that I'm looking for. So think about that from this point on when you're giving me responses regarding these questions that I'm asking, because I am looking for your brain engaging management information systems. That's what we're looking for. Remember, it's not so much me that you're responding to, but since you're taking a class in management information systems, think of yourselves as the team leader that is responding to their team, their staff, or their boss to questions being asked of them, technical questions. You don't quote the library or you don't quote a dictionary or a website that doesn't have anything to do with technology or management information systems to a question related to management information systems. So be very careful of that. It's very important that you are thinking in the mainframe that you are in a management information setting, and that's how you should address it. Okay, that being said, we are going to start with chapter 5. Chapter 5, we're talking about networking and communication. The most important part about this chart, about this chapter, is what we mentioned before. Networking today and communications have become one of the most important parts of technology, because without it, without networking and without communication systems, the way they're interconnected today, we couldn't have the type of applications that we are using and enhancing and taking advantage from. That's why networking and communications is important. It's a field on its own, and for so many people, including yours truly, it's like a dark cloud out there that I better not mess with. Because if I mess with, I will not have the access that I need. I will lose my information, so on and so forth. So it's important to understand it. When we're talking about communications and networking, the first item that comes to mind is internet. All the internet is a bunch of networks that are interconnected. One is a network A network is a node, a center point connected to a multitude of individual points. And those points can talk to each other, or they can only talk to that center. So that's basically a network. But as internet, which is a bunch of networks connected together, we have certain things that we work with. You see here a bunch of terminology. And unless you're involved with web pages or the actual hardware, like this hub that I'm showing you in here, or bridges or switches or routers, which are physical items, the packet is actual data that is being transmitted. Uh, it's important to realize that I lost my. It's important to realize that thus the information that we're trying to achieve every single time we connect, even within the office, at home, or across the world, we depend on these physical items, these boxes, and a bunch of items that are instructions for these boxes to connect. So we were talking about packets. Well, packets are defined as the way the network traffic, the way the data is moving through the network system. It moves in packets because we tend to think and we assume that when we send the letter packet, for example, across point A to point B, we're going to get all the word packet across. No, the network has multiple items coming at the same time to it. So it's allowing certain items to come out first, certain parts to come out second, then distributes them out and then readjust them and make them work together for you. But then the other item that comes into place in here is having the way to connect from point A to point B. And that's where items like IP address, domain name, DNS, packet switching, protocols come into place. These are basically definitions of the protocols or the instructions or the actual naming conventions that are being used to allocate instructions, to allocate a space, to allocate names for you to talk from point A to point B. You probably hear the term IP address a lot. You probably hear it in your company a lot. What is your IP address in your computer? That is because this connectivity relies on points to talk. I want to talk to point A to point B. Well, point A has a way to communicate, has an actual location, which is an IP address, and point B has another IP address. As long as we can connect those two items together, we can actually talk. Domain names, DNSs, we're talking about now how a website can connect to another website. Well, you have to apply for a domain name. If I run a website called PGR Patriot Guide Writers of South Texas, I have to apply to obtain that name, pgrstx.org, because it's not just me saying I want that name. I have to find out if it's available. Once I apply that name and I get it, then I can have my IP address, and they also obtain a DNS. That way I can connect from my website to any website and allow people to connect to my website. So this internet vocabulary, for some people will say, why am I learning this? What is the purpose of knowing this? Well, one, it's good to know why is it that this machine is talking to this machine And how is it talking to? That there is an actual box that allows you to distribute all these wires in an office or in a room and talk to each other without any problems. That's what is important to understand some of these items that we do. Networking in itself is a science, if you may. You have to be able to understand it, understand the configurations, and understand the way the operating system works. So it used to be that in order to have connectivity between computer A and computer B and computer C and a server, in other words, we created a network. We have to have an operating system. I mentioned earlier before today, Microsoft networking, Microsoft for networks or Windows networks, Windows for work groups. That is an operating system installed on a computer with the sole purpose of connecting systems and making them and allowing them to work. Our machines today, most software that you buy today, is already come configured to do all this. You don't need special items to work now. Your regular Windows 10 is already configured to talk. Your Linux, your iOS, all of them are configured so you can talk to machines and you can do actual configurations yourself if you want to, or the machine, as soon as it gets a signal through a little piece of hardware on the back of your computer called a network interface card or NIC, or a signal through a wireless item, which is your Wi-Fi connection from a router, you can have connectivity. The software understands it, is learning, and it maintains the protocol that allows you to talk from machine in room A to machine in room B to the router in the hall closet. No wires, but it's a wireless system connected to a protocol that is allowing the packets to move forward through that network. It used to be before wireless, we had all sorts of cables running today. If you ever have the way to look at a box, an actual rack, a network rack, you're gonna see cables coming all over the place, back and forth, lights, little bulbs, everything. Like you see here, you have connectivity points. You have a master entrance and connectivity points and other options to connect other items in here, even USB drives for external devices. The networks, the systems, the hardware is expanding constantly. Because if you see the name Cisco here, this name replaced Novell. Novell was replacing somebody else, so on and so forth. Whoever gains the competitive advantage with the better hardware puts themselves to a better position in the market. So, what is happening? Networks evolve, connectivity evolve. Back in the 80s, we had something that was called the dot-com bubble. And it was called the dot-com bubble because it burst. Like every bubble that you have with soap and so on and so forth, it will burst if you don't keep an item an eye on it. Well, it used to be that connectivity on the internet was controlled by a federal entity. When that connectivity existed, it only allowed certain type of communications to exist. There was no commercial applications available or allowed to exist. When the government began to open these avenues and allow commercial enterprise to participate on the internet, and began pulling away, it began opening the commercial market to the internet. When this happened, it began to grow so fast that it made millionaires overnight. It made people broke overnight because they didn't have a way uh, uh, to support themselves in such a big problem that they were having when everything busted. This was the case of growing too fast, growing too strong, and no way to actually control how things were going to happen and how things were going to operate for you. So then, after the dot com busted, the more entities came into place, and they're not actual federal organizations, they're actual private organizations, nonprofits, that began to regulate and self regulate the way we were doing business. When that began to happen, then it, be, it began a type of control. This is what we call Web 2.0. You've probably seen the term around in which you have in which you have more capacity because now we have applications that have access to basically anywhere we want to. The way websites were changing, changes were made so you were not looking anymore at site, you were looking for usability, efficiency, capacity to do business without just looking at a picture. In web development, it was called content that was static versus content that was dynamic. Can I do something to this with this website, or am I just looking at a picture? Well, if I want to buy something, do I need to buy it by calling the telephone number at the bottom and make an order over the telephone? Or can I go back and click on sales on a catalog and buy my product and put my credit card and do everything online? That's when the value went from display to content. It began to change. Then companies began to see that sales in Corpus Christi versus sales in San Antonio, Houston, or Dallas could be accessed by our main location in Houston, and we were able to see what everybody was doing. Or at the same time, we were able to see that our inventory was diminishing. In other words, data was available and we were able to see it across the board any which way we were looking for it. It wasn't as efficient as it is today, but it began to a revolution in technology that data started to become available for us to see. Grant you, we didn't have the capacity we have today, but we didn't have the kind of headaches that we have today with viruses and accessibility and ransomware. There were other problems. Viruses have been existing as long as the internet has been available to commercial enterprise because security always comes into place and security is always part of everything that we have been connecting with. One of the things that happen is that distribution, it says in here, is bottom up, not top down. In other words, the main office is not dictating anymore the way sales happen and operations happen, or things are going to be this way or that way. No, because now the company on the website that is being managed at a location began to see display, began to see sales, began to see inventory moving and changing. So the location itself, the website, was forcing the distribution to change. It was no longer being dictated from the top saying, we will hold this much inventory. No, now we would needed to listen to that inventory and see what was going to happen with it to make decisions on how are we going to separate this information. So the distribution of data, the distribution of information was no longer dictated by the top management, but by the public itself. When the public began accessing the website and began making decisions, is this what we want? Is not what we want, or how are we going to do it? Tools can now be accessed by customers and employees of their own, on their own. Well, that means, as it says, tools. What were tools? Well, that's when we began to see small items appearing that allow us to have more productivity without having to go through shutting down the system or working in ways that it was so inflexible for us to work with that we have to put the customer on hold. That way we can do something, or we have to now allow the customer to do it because we have the system in place. The simplest example that we have is a customer access their website and the customer wants to change their address. So if you think about it, as an employer, if you do not allow that a customer to do this kind of transactions within the realms of security that you have, you will have to have that customer engage your employee on a telephone, in person, on a fax machine to do this transaction change, a simple change of address. When you enable the fact that the data is now being able to share easily because your web page is no longer based on display by content, you are enabling that customer to access that database that you have online and do a change of address because your website is no longer static, it's now dynamic. So they can do it on their own. They don't have to depend on somebody to do it. At the same time, you maintain record of what is happening because the customer is able to do it. A big, huge thing that developed out of the dot-com bubble is social networking. The first sites for social networking began to appear. Some of you may have heard of MySpace or MyScape. I think it's MySpace. Then came Facebook, and then Instagram, and then Twitter, so on and so forth, and many other programs that have been coming and going over there in the networks. It enabled people to start talking and start saying what they felt could happen, could not happen, their displeasing, their likes, their dislikes, so on and so forth. This was huge because it shows now that the individual can now interact with the system. Web 2.0 brought this back to the forefront of us. So the universal access to application, well, if you look at MySpace, Facebook, so on and so forth, those were applications that were developed initially for computers because we didn't have the development on the telephone that we have today. So they were the first ones that came up and said, okay, I want to be friends with you. I don't want to be friends with you. And I want to see people that think about this way about pets. And I like people that look this for cars. And I like people that like to travel. So social networking was born. In resume, the Web 2.0 implied changes at how the internet was being used because all these different things began to happen simultaneously and continue developing. If you start to think about that, productivity began to take place because now we have more capacity, more efficiency of the way we use the internet. Networks begin to change. More capacity appears from the hardware. The lines began to improve. We were no longer at a simple piece of coaxial cable. Then we start thinking about what they call Cat5, Cat6, or firewires, or any kind of technology like this that is almost as fast as we can think it could be going. That's what began to revolutionize the web connection, the web 2.0. Everything began to happen. This brought up a very interesting point. We think about the internet and the World Wide Web, triple W, as one and the same, and they are not. They are two different animals altogether. Internet is defined as an interconnected network of networks. Think about that. The World Wide Web is just one of those parts of the internet. It's not necessarily one specific network that is makes the internet. It's just one of many networks that made the internet. So when next time you think about the internet, you're not thinking about World Wide Web by itself. You're thinking now many World Wide Web connections. Each one of those connections that you do, each time that you enter an address on a browser, you are connecting to the internet via a specific network. You access a network and you have the connectivity between that network and your network works with your internet service provider to access the internet and view at a specific website or location. Any questions? Okay. As we said, the internet and the World Wide Web are not the same. They're two different things. Then we have Wi-Fi, which is now wireless communication, going back and forth to allow us to see and to talk to each other. In the beginning, think about this. Wi-Fi did not exist. We have to use everything using some kind of a line. The first type of line was your telephone system. And we use protocol to connect with that telephone system to another computer or to a website. With the advent of the Wi-Fi technology, the wireless signal, that enable us to connect to anybody that has access to a network by just connecting, seeing the information over the airwaves. So that airwave connection replaced the wire connection, that it was as simple as a telephone or as fast as a cable connection uh, today. Bluetooth is another type of connection that exists that is being basically appear as an essential part of connectivity with computers, and then expanded and developed more as part of our portable equipment. There are tablets, our phones, because it's a technology that enables you to talk and to communicate between operating systems, between machines, between applications, and the connectivity. It is not a network system. It's just a way to connect to that network system with a peripheral item. The VoIP, or voice over IP, is basically the development that you allowed plain communication over the phone line to the internet to a third party, to you. Voice is coming through without being stopped and separated in locations and spaces. Say, uh, what is happening in there? What is it? What is it? How is my connectivity going on in there? Why is it that that we can connect, or how we can connect? Then comes terminology that we call LAN and WAN. Your first networks. The local area network, you have a center point and it routes information from user to user, and it still allows you to go over here to this net user, to another user, or to a central location for printing. This usually began to be developed as each network user is a client, each central user in here is connected through a server, and you go to a printing system or a printer server and you connect that way. But then when you have this little nucleus of information in here, you have things like this: a one wide area network, which is in essence a bunch of small LANs connected, interconnected with each other. Each one of them has a workstation with their application. They connect to a server, so on and so forth. This connectivity in here of the one connects to another set of connectivities in somewhere else, somewhere else. Think about it from the point of view, you're in the city, you have different locations of the city. One building is a LAN, one floor is a LAN, and then the connectivity to the next building for you or your office is another LAN. The connectivity between the two of them is two LANs connected together. Now we began to have a wide area network. The most common example you're gonna see or you're gonna hear about, the city of Corpus Christi, for example, or San Antonio, or Houston, or Dallas, where they're using a wireless system to read your public utility meters. That utility meter connects to a wireless system who reads through an application what you have spent in water, on wastewater, on electricity, and then they go back and read it and analyze that information and bill you for it. So the city of Corpus Christi, the utilities, the city of Houston, the city of Dallas or San Antonio, they all have the same setup in place where you can actually have a wide area network and read information across for everybody. The definition basically for the network comes in from the point of view that each computer or each connection of that network connects through what is called a client. The server is the central repository where everything comes through and leaves. So this is your normal definition of a database or a central repository. If this client wants to answer the central repository to look at certain information, they do it from their office. It's a desktop. If I'm on the street and I'm looking at information that I require, I connect to the same thing. I have something in common between this client and this client. We both have the connectivity to talk to this server. In other words, our credentials are such that we can talk, discuss, and retrieve or upload information. So this is the basic relationship between the client and the server. Is that protocol that enables you to go back and forth and talk to the server as a client. We were talking about the intranet. You have internet, which is a bunch of networks connected together, makes the World Wide Web, part of each one network. But then you have the intranet. The intranet is a mini network inside a local area. And a local area could be a building, a city, a region. But each individual area has a specific set of protocols that are not on the internet. So branch office can talk to LAN 1 or to VLAN 2 or to the retail site or to the console without ever going onto the internet. It's a direct communication back and forth. The internet is available. If they want to access the internet, they could do so. But generally, intranets are secure to the point that you do not connect to the internet when you're on an intranet, because an intranet is a specific of the location where you are. If this is the headquarters company and these are uh, separate locations of the company, they connect to the company itself. They view the information, they view notices, they view applications without ever going to the internet. If you ever look at their addresses, they don't have a www.headquarters.com. This one is branchoffice.com or console.com or retailagency.com. No, they all have the same company, www.mycompany.com. Mycompany.com connects with the network via the network to this location, to this location, and to this location. But each location, if he wants to access the internet, can do so by going through specific locations that enables you or disable you from doing so. The branch officer, the branch office could go to the firewall and then connect to the internet. The console can do the same thing. The console is just an individual item that is connected to the internet or to the firewall. The same thing with the agency. The firewall isn't there to stop you from accessing certain points that you should not be doing, or stopping people that are not allowed from coming into your network. So basically, your intranet is a mini internet that is local to you, your company, and that's it. Now, a new term that has been coming into uh, the spectrum nowadays is called the extranet. You have intranet, intranet, and intranet. Remote employees, consumers. We saw this today in today's environment when they sent us home because of the pandemic and we had to work from home. In order to work from home, we were given a virtual private network connectivity to the company's information, the intranet. In other words, I could access the database of the company from my house as a remote employee. Consumers could access the company because they can always view the website for the company, information, so on and so forth through the internet. A trading partner, for example, wanting to access the website for the company to do business, to require on billing, to inquire on transactions, will do it through a secure location to the corporate intranet through a VPN, another private network from the partner to the company. The trading partner, which is in a totally different location outside the regular area where we are, will do the same thing. So only one connection exists to the internet in here direct to the company. That doesn't mean that the remote employee will not access the internet. He or she will be able to access the internet. The problem will be is that while you are connected to the VPN, your connectivity is going to be restricted to whatever the intranet, the corporate intranet will have available to you. The same thing with these guys, the trading partners trying to connect to the corporate intranet to the VPN. You cannot connect to the internet while you're in here. You can connect in here on your own, but the connectivity to this point is private. It's a virtual private connection that exists between the two of you. Okay, information system security. This is the first term that you're going to be using on your report paper, the information security triad. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You have to analyze the security triad with your company. How is this going to apply to you? How does it apply to the company? And the way the security triad works is if you don't have integrity, but you have availability and confidentiality, you think you have internet security? Or if you do not have confidentiality, but you have integrity and availability, you think you have security in your company. This is designed so the three of them, the information security triad, or what they call CIA, has to exist and has to be mutually accepting of each other. It cannot be exclusive out of each other. It has to, all three have to exist in order for the security triad to exist. So, in order to maintain this information security, you enter into a realm of items that continue to evolve every day, depending on your network, depending on your connection, depending on your connectivity. For example, the mere fact that I'm asking you to register for the Zoom, when you get the email telling you we have a Zoom, is done on purpose because the university is requiring that we have some kind of access control before we can enable anybody from coming in into the system. The way I see it from my end is I verify your name against a list. If I can match the name to the list, I can allow you in. If I do not recognize the name, telephone number, location, or whatever you're giving me as part of the information that I have available, I cannot let you in. That's how access control is working in here. Then you have authentication. So authentication in here basically states that in order to allow you to come in or enable you to work with something that I have that I deem valuable, I have to have certain items that enables me to maintain the security. And I'm listing three of the most common of them. Biometric authentication, RSA security ID token, or two-factor authentication. For most of us in today's environment, we are seeing that biometric and two-factor authentication are the most common items that we see. Why? Because they're getting to be integrated with the applications that we use every day on our phones, on our tablets, on our computers. Part of that change that is happening in our technology would enable us to view information a lot faster and access the information a lot faster. Biometric implies that we're using a biological scan. Something that belongs to our bodies is being used as a tool to connect because no two are alike and it's impossible to reproduce, or so we think. I'm showing you the first biometric scan, which is your fingerprints. Some people say they cannot be reproduced. Some people say you can put glue in your finger and you can make a copy of your fingerprint and put it on the scanner and it will read it. I do not know that. I've seen that on the movies. I do not know if something that can be actually done. Face recognition, that is something that is moving along really, really fast. Since the advent of the war on terror, we have seen this explode 100% fall to the point that we can no longer walk anywhere in the world without being scanned. Huge databases across the world are set up so they can store the information and compare information on a specific points that they see fit with the description of your face or the way your face is looked up. So basically what the scanning is they look at certain reference points and they go compare them against something that they know to see if there is a match or how close they can match it. That's why something that is very interesting to see and to hear is how advanced this technology is as far as using biological information to interface with the hardware and the software. Your RSA token ID, this is something that is being used a lot in companies where the networks are maintained in a very secure connectivity. Nobody can access, nobody can turn the equipment on unless they maintain a key like this that is matched against the information provided on the host equipment. The key is generated on the keychain or the USB port, and that's matched against a key that is received on the computer. If they match, it enables you to go into the application. If not, it will deny you access. The most common item that we're seeing today, two-factor authentication. And we're seeing it a lot because if your computer gets hacked and you get a virus or something, somebody can copy your password and username. But if your computer requires a two-factor authentication, no longer are you using a username and a password, but you are also asked to produce information based on a third item, a third option to give information to the computer. So a third code is generated in order to provide information to you and the system that you're trying to access. This is very new and is developing really fast, especially with the phone applications and with websites that interface with the phone and with the regular computer. They want to maintain that kind of connectivity because even if your information is hacked, they cannot access, two computers cannot be accessed at the same time with the same security code. So they may have your username and password, but they don't have the security code that it just generated or was generated for you. And even if they try to copy it and enter it on their system, then it cannot be replicated. That being said, it doesn't mean that they cannot mimic your computer and reproduce everything that you're doing and trying to access. At that point is how fast is their access compared to yours. So it's a mute point. But I always said it. If they want to get in, they're going to get in. So the best option is to be safe with your connectivity. That's your two-factor authentication, your RSA security ID token, and your biometric scans. Factors that are part of authentication that are designed to give control and to provide control to accessibility to networks and to systems in general. One more item that is being built around networks, especially for business, is called access control. Access control is part of the biometric authentication, RSA security token, and two-factor authentication. The biggest difference in here it means is the exact definition of access control. Who actually are you giving access? Who actually and to what you were given access to? Just because I have access doesn't mean that I can see everything or access everything that I think is in my purview. So we have two types of controls: the access control list and the role access control list. So in access control list, for example, we have 4 items, 4 different types of files. Each individual on the file, listening to the file, have different rights to that file. In the first case, Alice owns the file, can read the file, and can write to the file. She was the creator. File number 2, Alice, she can read and write, but she doesn't own it. File number 3, Bob can read it and write it. We don't know who created it, who owns it, but that means that only Bob and Alice have access to files 1, 2, and 3. File number 4, Alice can actually execute this file. In the overall picture, files 1, 2, 3, and 4 can be accessed by Alice and Bob, with Alice having the more access or the more control to the 4 different types of files. Bob has been granted access also to file number 1. He can only read and write to file number 3, but file number 1, now he has ownership. He can read and he can write. Carl, another person in our group, now can see file number 4 and can execute commands on that file. When they say execute, that means you can actually make applications happen to you on the command, but they will have limitations as to what you can do with it. So files 1, 2, 3, and 4 have accessibility by 4 different people, with Alice having the most access in here. The same thing is happening in your company. When specific people can access certain files, you may have seen the majority of the files. You may see the majority but certain files. This concept is very common when you define databases and accessibility to database tables. You do not want the table to be erased. You don't want the table to be compromised. You don't want to be the files, the database files, to be corrupt. So X people have a specific access, Y people have major access, Z people are the owners. They have the ultimate access. We call them God access because they can actually read, write, execute, move, delete. They are the owners, basically, of the file, of the table, of the document. So in access control, we're giving individuals access. When we're looking at role access control, we are not looking to access these documents by who, by what do they do. So we are normal users in our work. As normal users, we can access files B, C, and D. As systems administrators, I can only access file A. Or users that are, let me rephrase this, users that are systems administrators, that's their role, can actually see everything. Edit, access, edit files for the users, or read full bar files. That's a very, it's a joke being made in there. But basically, if you're a system administrator as a user, you have all the rights that you want. Users that are classified B, C, D have classification of roles as normal users. Normal users can see and access the network and can edit user files. That's it. Users that are D, E, F, and G have, for D, have limited access. For E, F, and G, they go and have the access of a student, which is going to be limited, more limited than the regular limited access. So as limited access is concerned, you can edit user files. As a student, you can access the network and you can read. You can cause havoc, but it's in a very limited way of doing things. You're getting access, but that's about it. Role is users H, I, and J have limited access and they can only do edit users. So if you think about it, in your company, you're going to have access to a project and you're going to sit down and do this in writing and say, okay, I want Sam to access only this data, sales. I want Paul only to have access to sales and HR. I want Josephine to have access to everything because Josephine actually sit down and gave me a very comprehensive and detailed information on how the system is going to work. Rick, Rachel are going to be normal users. So they work for purchasing as purchasing normal users. They can access the network and they can go back and edit and use files. So what you're doing with the role access control is basically saying the type of user that can access my network or my system is going to be based on what they do. On the access control list, you actually go person by person and says, okay, you guys can only access these and these and these. Irregardless of what you do, you are making the decisions on access control by using the name of the group and the specific files that they're going to add. But in role access control, which is an item that we see a lot, especially in major companies, your access is going to be determined by how your company works, what kind of role you have. And this is when you find yourself calling your IT department and says, I need to access the database. I need to access this table. I need to access this type of information. And the system administrator is going to come back and say, well, wait a minute. your name is David. In here it says that you have limited use and you can only edit users. I said, well, I need to do more than just edit the users. I need to be able to access the network and read the files. So that network administrator is going to come back and change your access from limited role to normal user role. You become the person in charge of the network. You become a person in charge of the project. You're the network manager or the project manager. You may have access specifically to accessing the network, edit the users, and read full bar files. But you may not have access to edit the system files. Again, the access to the system is being determined by a role. What did you do and how you do it? That's how you're going to access that network, that operating system, that specific application. Or everybody that needs to access the sales file can only be the following people. So access control, part of the authentication process, part of the security, could be as a control list, individual, or role-based, based on how you do it and what did you do for the company, for the department. When we're talking about network security, we see a lot the term called firewall. Firewall can be something physical, or it can be a software piece. Many of us have antiviruses, or we use Windows to determine accessibility on what we do and how we do it onto the networks. That is a virtual firewall. Some of us may have an actual box that connects from the network onto the computer and vice versa before getting into the computer to access the internet and connect. A firewall, a physical firewall. So that firewall is going to accept you, is going to reject you, is going to drop you. If it cannot place you, if it cannot qualify you to have access, it will block you from access. If you cannot meet the credentials that I'm being asked to enter, it will reject you. Or it can match the credentials that you're given to access the network, and then it will let you in. So in essence, the network depends, or the connectivity that we have will depend strictly on usability, personal information security, and always stop, think, and connect. So how usable is what we're working with? It's a lead piece of metal. We cannot use it for anything. What kind of personal information are we leveraging in here? What is the security like? Is our firewall up to date? Have we updated the database of viruses so it can stop the leakage of personal information? Because remember, once you're accepted onto the network, you go through the firewall, you're going to be distributing information out of the firewall. It goes out. So that personal information security, your antivirus, your way of verifying information, your way of maintaining security on the network is going to be very important. The reality is when they say stop, think, and connect, because you need to stop and see what you're doing. You have to think, what am I accessing and connect? Am I accessing something that should not be accessed? Have I verified that indeed this is a clean site? It's been known to cause problems and viruses. Nowadays, with the intrusion systems that are in place, you never know what you're getting into. With that, a simple video or clicking on a document or a link. Social networks have done this to us to a great extent. So it's very important to stop, think, and connect as a way of participating and maintaining the security that we want to maintain and maintain the reliability of our networks. Why? Because we want to maintain and gain the competitive advantage in order to meet our needs or the companies. All right. As I said before, this was going to be short chapters. There is a lot of information that can be covered in here, but I'm going to delay some of that information because you're going to do some of the research. Some of the research is part of the homework that I'm giving you, which is something like the origins of the internet, ARPANET. Do some quick search. You don't have to be too detailed, but you can do that and give me some information regarding that. It's fascinating to see that how it was developed, how it started, and then the applications that we have today and how are we doing things today is an incredible feat for everything that we do. Do I have any questions on the topics? Any comments?